How's it going, guys? Welcome back to the Black Metal Rebellion. I'm your host, Jesse Morgan, aka Slammerella, and today we have a review to do, this time of the band Hellfekted and their debut album, Woe to the Kingdom of Blood, that was released on March 29th of this year, 2020. Before this, they have an EP in 2019, also entitled Woe to the Kingdom of Blood. And if you don't know who Hellfekted are, they are a kind of black tinged thrash metal band out of England, UK. On the Metal Encyclopedia site, it says they're blackened thrashing death. However, I didn't really see any death metal specific elements, unless you count like early Possessed or early Chuck Schuldiner death stuff or Mantis stuff, which is more thrashy death anyways. But yeah, for the most part, it's just kind of dark, black tinged thrash metal. So I'm going to be calling them that instead. Thanks to the guys from Hellfekted for sending me the review copy to go along with the patch I ordered off their bandcamp. Got your patch right here. Before that was there, I had a UKR patch right here that I wanted to replace anyway. So, yep, got you guys right next to Reactory and Municipal Waste and Artillery. So, perfect spot to replace that UKR patch. Love the logo, love the green, perfect stuff. All right, so enough gushing over the merch. Let's actually get on to the band and the album Woe to the Kingdom of Blood itself. So the members that are in this project are as follows: Liam Stubbs on guitar and vocals, Miles Stockton on drums, and Chris Brownrigg on bass and backup vocals. All right, so what did I think of the vocals? Well, they were about medium in the mix, just kind of slightly under the guitars and slightly under the drums, still audible. The mix style in your headphones is more kind of centered style, not directly in front of you, but just slightly off coming out your ears like this. Whereas when I mix, I try to mix them straight, not straight left and right, but just off left and right. So they try to go for more centered style and a little bit quieter style, but you could still hear his vocals and they were still very audible. As for the vocals themselves, they had a consistent performance throughout, and the style was this kind of mid to high pitched, blackened, screaming style of vocals. The effects or whatever was going on with these vocals though seemed like it was either distorted or had some slight distortion effects on it, or were either peaking in the levels. I'm not sure how that works, because with how low in volume the vocals are, the vocals sound as if they are peaking. So when you're recording and your levels go too high and it goes into the red zone and peaks, it makes that kind of like blown speaker sound. And I don't know if it's intentional or whatever, but that's what the vocals kind of sound like to me. It's an interesting, unique sounding type of vocals for sure, and it's definitely something you'd recognize right away if you put on this project. So a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B on how I feel about it. Cool and unique, but also questioning whether it's intended or if it's actually a good approach. Now for the guitars, they were handled by Liam. We're about medium to high in the mix, about on par with the drums, well balanced. They had a nice left and right EQ, performed really well, and they seemed precise and on time. Now, as for what you can expect in the guitar area, there is definitely some thrashy power chords and some quick, energetic riffing, as well as some catchy, groovy hooks throughout and some melodic solos, which you can definitely hear on OMEN of the ANTICHRIST. So lots of really fun, interesting things going on in the riff and guitar department. Now let's move on to the bass. The bass in this album was actually audible, so extra points there for having a bass player be heard in an album. So with that being said, they are low to medium in the mix, just under the vocals. Also seemingly performed well. From what I heard, it seemed to go along perfectly with the guitar riffing and the drums and everything. The bass player definitely seemed to know what they're doing. So good job, Chris. The bass had a nice, crisp, punchy tone. Very hefty, mean, and clunky throughout. And it certainly beefed up the low end and percussion side of things for the entire album. It was definitely most prominent on the track Stigma, where it even kind of had like a little bit of a time to shine and stick out, and definitely was a nice treat to hear that on this album. All right, so moving on to the drums. They were, once again, medium to high in the mix, on par with the guitars. There also seemed to be the sort of peaked levels part in the mixing as well. There's just kind of some extra distortion or noise going on with the snare and some of the cymbals. Not sure if it was unintentional or if it just kind of went unnoticed, but if you're paying attention, you can definitely tell there's something slightly different going on with the snare and some of the cymbals. The double kicks, on the other hand, were really good, really punchy and solid. Miles definitely has a unique and diverse way of maneuvering around the kit and really making it his own when it comes to producing beats in different time shifts with the riffs presented throughout the tracks. There's also a cool little quick, short but sweet drum solo in the last track, Archaic Demise. As well, throughout the album, there are some cool little bell ride little ticks and tacks that he does and adds in there that I always am a sucker for. Anything kind of bells and whistles when it comes to sounds coming from the drum kit, I really love, whether it's a more cowbell, whether it's a wooden block, or just little metallic ride dings, or just like sashaying kind of lifted hi-hat sounds going on, or even like rim shots and stuff. I just like little extra flavor, uniqueness going on when the drummer decides to throw it in there. So extra bonus points there, Miles. All right, so let's go on to my favorite tracks on this album, and that being the second track in Treachery is probably one of my favorite ones. Just has some really great riffs, a fun outro riff to close the track, and once again, those nice little bell ride ticks and tacks added in for good measure. I love it, once again, when drummers do that. My second favorite track off of this album has to be track 6, and that is Omen of the Antichrist. Just very energetic, very groovy riffs, more bell ride accents going on. There's some nice melodic, soulful solos as well, and it kind of feels like the climax of the album. It feels like if this track wasn't there, you would definitely be missing out, and it certainly adds the kind of big third act punch in the gut that sums up the story of what's going on in Woe to the Kingdom of Blood. And finally, I had to choose between Tower of Life, which is track 3, and the last track being Archaic Demise. Tower of Life was the 7-minute long kind of epic, just back and forth with different fast riffs, different catchy riffs, and just kind of this building of tension and release throughout. But I decided to go with the shorter track. I think it's just over 2 minutes, and that being the last track on the album, Archaic Demise, because it was just kind of another catchy riff-laden track, and also it included that short but sweet drum solo, and I'm kind of a sucker for drums for whatever reason. So yeah, I've definitely come to learn to appreciate more aspects of being a drummer and drumming techniques and just the eccentricities of being a drummer. So yeah, really cool stuff there. All right, so let's go over some of my overall thoughts on this album, though. What I felt about this album is that it was a raw and wildly ferocious journey. There is obviously lots of excellent and catchy riffs to choose from. The guitarist definitely didn't fall short on tricks that he could pull out of his bag. It was just overall filled with vim and vigor, with mosh sections to spare, and it was a very ominous, violent atmosphere that kind of loomed over the entire album. You could just feel like something kind of grim and foreboding was there, but also it was kind of lashed with this violent overtones and constantly feeling the need to keep pushing on and pushing on. And basically, this album was if Bathory reinterpreted some early aspects of Metallica's Kill 'Em All or And Justice for All, and even threw in some of like the darker, heavier side of some Iron Maiden grooves and licks in there. You could really notice some of the influences from the early thrash scene in that sense, but tinged with that kind of first wave black metal rawness and lo-fi-ness. So with that being said as well, with a better mix and higher production value, Hellfekted will be a force to reckon with in the future, because with the amount of excellent guitar work, the amount of ideas they've got going on, and the energy and conviction to their performance, there will be no stopping these guys in the future if they do a second album. Can't wait to see what they do. And yeah, in that regards, there's only a couple of things that I could think of for weaknesses or improvements. Very specifically, something odd kind of happens in the mix for the track Fire at Will around the 37-second mark. For example, there's like this layer of low end tone that kind of comes and washes in and switches the feel from being kind of lo-fi and trebly to more of a warm and bassy tone. I'm not sure either if it kind of takes the left and right mix and kind of centers it a certain way too, but something kind of odd happens around the 37-second mark in Fire at Will. And once again, overall production seems kind of muddy and lo-fi. I'm not sure if that's intentional or not, but I feel they would definitely benefit from a higher production and a better mix. The vocals seem a bit suppressed too, a little low in volume. There is a weird distortion effect or clipping thing that's going on with the vocals that don't allow you to fully get that punch and solidness with the vocals that could be there. And sort of the same thing that kind of happens with the snare and cymbals. With the drums, there's either some peaking going on or some improper levels going on with those, or some distortion or something. And the last thing that I kind of noticed, I can't remember what track or tracks it was, but a couple of the guitar breakdown segments, there's no like deathcore breakdowns or anything like that, but like the thrashy kind of breakdowns, I feel like the guitar riffs and the syncopation of the way the riff is being played doesn't quite match up with what the kicks and the drummer is attempting to do. So the corresponding drum beat doesn't quite work with some of it. I feel like the drummer tried to syncopate the double kicks with the pattern of the breakdown, did it for like maybe 2 seconds or like a quarter of the riff, and then switched over to just kind of adding one kick instead of like the triplet kick, technically speaking. But with all that being said, the good definitely outweighed the bad with this album. If you're not going into this album looking to pick out all of the things that's going on with it, and you're just going in there to have fun and listen to it and enjoy it for being an album and not being a reviewer, you would definitely have a lot of fun with this. You would definitely be headbanging a lot with this. There's a lot of guitar riffs and things going on with this that certainly makes for a fun time and an enjoyable listen. So despite some of the mixing and some of the production issues, this is definitely an album worth listening to. I highly recommend listening to Hellfekted's Woe to the Kingdom of Blood. And with that being said, I'm giving it a 7.5 out of 10 or a 75 out of 100. Certainly worth going and checking out if you want a modern kind of dark thrash band. And yeah, so that is my take on Hellfekted's Woe to the Kingdom of Blood, released this year, March 29th. I'm Jesse Morgan, and I would buy this album. For glory, for the Rebel Alliance, Slammerella out.